Alright guys, recently something pretty interesting has been happening with Forsaken, and it's something a lot of players have started to notice. The player count has been a bit lower than usual, and while there hasn't been a clear explanation for it, there are definitely some reasons behind this. The problem is, the community hasn't really been given a direct answer, so people have started to figure things out themselves. And that's led to one big question that's been going around lately. Is Forsaken actually fun right now? This wasn't something random players were saying either. Hytoko actually went ahead and asked the community directly on Discord whether players are enjoying the game. It was supposed to be a simple poll, just a general question to see how people were feeling, but it quickly became something bigger because when the results came in, the majority of players actually voted no, and that alone says a lot about the current state of the game. So why are people saying this? One of the biggest issues that kept coming up was balance. A lot of players feel like the game has become very unbalanced, especially when it comes to right now. If you're experienced enough, you can loop killers pretty easily, and because of that, matches can feel predictable and repetitive rather than intense or challenging. At the same time, the objectives haven't changed either. As a survivor, you're still doing the same thing every match. You spawn in, go straight to generators, complete them as quickly as possible, and then avoid the killer. And the problem now is that players have gotten so good at doing generators as they can be finished in literally seconds now, and with like 8 players in a match, it's so easy. So there's not really any variation anymore and not any difficulty of doing the generators. So it just feels like repeating the same process over and over again. A lot of players are also pointing out another issue that ties into all of this, and that's the focus on skins compared to actual gameplay improvements. Forsaken has been getting a lot of new skins lately, which is great for variety visually, but it doesn't really change how the game plays. And because of that, it starts to feel like content is being added, but not in the way that actually improves the experience. Another huge problem that keeps coming up is looping. From what players are saying, looping has become a major issue for certain killers, especially characters like Nolly. Right now, there aren't enough tools to properly deal with perma-looping, which means survivors can just keep running around the same spot over and over again. That makes it frustrating for killers, because it feels like there's not much you can do to counter it. Even for a character like Slasher, this is still a problem. Slasher is one of the few killers without a projectile type ability, so dealing with loops becomes even more annoying. Even though Slasher does gain speed when looping happens, which helps a bit, but it still doesn't fully solve the issue. It just feels like something that needs to be reworked to make matches more balanced and actually enjoyable for both sides. And this all connects back to the bigger issue, which is repetition. Matches are starting to feel the same every time, and that's where the boredom comes from. There needs to be more variation in gameplay, whether that's through different generator types or entirely new objectives that change how each match plays out, because if nothing changes, the game risks becoming too repetitive over the long term. A good example of this is something like Doors, where once you reach door 100, there's not much reason to keep playing unless you're going for specific achievements. That's obviously an extreme case, but it shows what can happen to a game if it doesn't keep evolving. Forsaken just needs more ways to keep things fresh, so players actually want to come back and play again. This leads into another major issue that was highlighted in a second poll, which is the lack of uniqueness in each match. And honestly, this might be the biggest problem right now. Every game feels almost identical, with everything happening the same to the killer and then the survivors doing their usual. There's nothing new being added to that experience, which makes it feel just repetitive from both sides. And when you compare Forsaken to other games, this becomes even more noticeable. In some similar games, there are additional objectives that mix things up. For example, instead of only doing generators in Bite by Night, there's like this big power bank that players can carry, which they need to take across the map or do some different kind of task to actually change how the match plays out. And with that, that is a risk that the player has to take in order to speed up the time for them to escape. And that kind of variety is what keeps players engaged, and it's something that Forsaken is currently lacking. Another major thing people have pointed out is the lack of game modes. This is something that Forsaken has teased before, like with the Double Trouble sneak peek, but we still haven't seen anything fully implemented. And that's where the game feels like it's falling behind. Because if you look at games like Die of Death or even modded Forsaken versions, they already have these different modes and make each match feel different. Like in Die of Death, they have the super scary mode where there's like a big entity on the map that chases everyone and you have to run away from that and the killer at the same time. As well, they have a whole game mode where everyone is killer and everyone gets to kill everyone, which makes the game more fun compared to just playing the same thing again and again. So having like these random events and other game modes that make the game replayable, it will literally solve this problem quite quickly and bring a lot of players back. And that's exactly what Forsaken needs right now, because there's a difference between repetition and replayability. At the moment, Forsaken leans more toward repetition. Even though there are still players who enjoy it and continue to play it for hours, it doesn't change the fact for many people the game is starting to feel stale. And that's where some players are even saying that the April Fool's update with Swapsaken felt more fun than the actual main game, because at least that mode offered something different and gave players a reason to keep coming back, with the uniqueness of the swap between killers and survivors. Right now, the core gameplay just doesn't change enough between matches to keep that same level of excitement. There are also smaller issues that add to the overall problem. One of them is the skill gap between players. You might have someone just casually playing the game and then they end up going against someone that's been playing for a while, that probably has like 1,000 hours and has mastered things like stamina management and looping. That creates a frustrating experience, especially for newer or more casual players, because it feels like there's nothing they really can do to compete. Another factor is the lack of consistent hype around updates. Yes, we do get sneak peeks from time to time, but they usually gain attraction for a day and then they just fade away. There's no real build up or ongoing excitement that keeps players engaged while waiting for new content. Because of that, it can feel like nothing is really happening, even when behind the scenes things are being worked on. Not announcing the update or just saying that nothing is coming, it doesn't get the game noticed by people who haven't played Forsaken in a while. The good thing is, the developers are aware of these issues. After seeing a lot of feedback from the polls, Haitoko mentioned that the team is working on pushing out changes sooner than expected. Not immediately, but sooner on their roadmap. They even acknowledged that the game has been the same for about a year, which shows that they understand the current problems. They recognize that the game is starting to feel stale, that survivors can sometimes dominate matches too quickly, and that objectives are being completed too quickly. So hopefully we'll start seeing improvements in the coming updates, whether that's through balance changes, new content, or completely new features. Looking forward, there are a few things that could improve the game. Adding game modes is probably the biggest one, as it would instantly bring more variety and make matches feel less repetitive. Introducing new objectives would also help a lot, especially if they require different strategies instead of just completing generators. On top of that, adding better rewards like unique skins or achievements would give players more reasons to keep playing. Another important change would be improving how updates are presented. Building more hype, sharing more information, and keeping players engaged between updates would make a huge difference. Because right now, even when something new is coming, it doesn't always feel exciting enough to bring players back, just like the Easter update. At the end of the day, Forsaken isn't a bad game. It's just a game that hasn't evolved enough recently. And because of that, players are starting to notice the repetition more than the enjoyment. But the potential is still there. If the devs can introduce new things to the game and add a bunch of variety, that could bring back the sense of excitement, with the game easily becoming more fun again. So what do you think? Do you think Forsaken is still fun right now? And subscribe and like so Forsaken changes up their game.